Hi everyone, I'm Mia.
And I'm Laura, and welcome back to the Stories Behind Research podcast.
Today we are welcoming our second guest, Diana Martynova, a high school senior who was an ISEF winner, competitive fencer, and attended international research conferences. So the first question we have for you is just to generally introduce yourself. So what's your name, your grade, where you're from, and just a bit about yourself in general, and then we'll get into some more specific questions.
Okay, so hello, my name's Diana Martynova. I'm from Los Gatos, California. I'm a senior at Los Gatos High School, and I'm going to be pursuing my next 4 years of education at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. My major is going to be mechanical engineering. I'm like a very STEM-oriented person. So yeah, that's just like kind of a broad overview of who I am.
Okay, cool. The next thing we're wondering is if you want to share any of your high school academic stats. So if you took any APs, also if you took the ACT or the SAT and how that went for you.
Yeah, so at school, I tried to take as many AP classes that I could, which meant 2 sophomore year, 4 junior year, and then 5 senior year. I tried to maintain my 4.0 GPA throughout my 4 years of high school. In terms of ACT or SAT, I took both. I took the SAT first. I actually took it 3 times, and it didn't really end up working out for me all the 3 times. So I actually switched to the ACT after that, and I did much better on the ACT compared to the SAT.
So I think we're just going to get started right into your research, which is the main focus of our podcast. So can you go over what were your main research projects when you were in high school?
Yeah, so I think I have 2 main research projects, or my 2 favorites, I guess. First one, it's very good in terms of how it did in the science fair aspect or realm. So this project was in my sophomore year in 10th grade. It was on counterfeit seed distribution. So to give you a broad overview, there's seeds that are being sold around the world, but mostly in Africa. You have these corn seeds or these maize seeds that farmers purchase. And unfortunately, a lot of the seeds that they purchase are counterfeit seeds or fake seeds that don't end up growing. So what my project kind of focused on was how could I develop a system that could make sure that when the farmers are buying and purchasing their seeds, they can have some verification process to ensure that these seeds came from the manufacturer and they indeed are true seeds and not counterfeit seeds that some trader along the distribution chain put in to sell. And so this verification process involved the use of biopolymer crystals and a Raspberry Pi, where you just scan the crystal and it can verify if the seed came from the manufacturer or not. So this project did decently well in the local fair, the regional fair, the state fair, and then the international fair. And then my second project, which was in 11th grade, it didn't do as well as in the terms of the fairs, but I was able to publish a 5-page abstract on that and go to a international conference on AI in healthcare. So that project focused on developing novel drugs, because currently we kind of have stagnated in our ability to develop novel drugs and novel chemical compounds. And so what that project kind of did was it created this system that could, for unknown pathogens, it could create a set of chemicals that could have a high potential of being able to kill that type of unknown pathogen.
Yeah, I think I'm really interested in your project on the seed detection. So do you want to kind of elaborate on your your experience on taking that project to the state fair and also the international fair?
Yeah, so okay, if I want to let's go into more details first. So essentially, the way I got inspired for this project is I read this MIT paper from the MIT Technology Review that they actually were the ones who brought up this issue, and they had a lab that was making these biopolymer crystals to use as unique identification tags for these maize seeds. However, their verification equipment was this kind of multi-thousand-dollar device called a Raman spectrometer. And I think that device also required Wi-Fi. So when I was going through their quote solution, I was thinking to myself, okay, lots of these rural farmers most likely don't have constant access to Wi-Fi. Depends on where they're located. And also most likely won't be able to purchase multi-thousand-dollar equipment. So in my mind, I was already starting to think, okay, if I were to create a solution for this project or for this issue, I'd have to create a project that is both cheap and doesn't have to rely on Wi-Fi. So that was kind of the two main goals that I kept in my head throughout this process. So I kept their initial solution of using those biopolymer crystals as like unique identifiers. So some, you can have like barcodes on books. These essentially are barcodes except on seeds. And so what my system does is essentially, if you're a farmer purchasing seeds, you can, and if the manufacturer, so like the idea behind this is the manufacturer places a drop on each seed and then kind of creates a unique tag for each drop. So you're going to have a unique kind of set of numbers for each seed. And so as a farmer, if you're given a bag of seeds, you can take out like 5 seeds, for example, scan the biopolymer with your camera, and then using the like kind of computer model that I created, it's going to be able to verify whether the number that the manufacturer generated for that specific biopolymer is the number that you're getting on the phone in your hand. So essentially that kind of verifies it with the manufacturer, even if you're not purchasing it directly from the manufacturer. Now, in terms of taking it to kind of the state fair, so my local fair is called Synopsis Science Fair, and they select like a handful of students to go to your state fair. So I was selected to go to the state fair. Unfortunately, that state fair that year was still online. It only recently went back to being in person. So I did my fair through Zoom, and that was pretty fun. Not as fun as in person, of course. And then from there, they select a very small group of students to go to the international fair. So then I went to the international fair, which that year was in LA. And that was a very fun experience. Like if you have the opportunity to do that, you should totally do that. Super, super fun.
Wow, that's so cool. I love the tags and everything. So one of our questions, which I think a lot of students wonder, is like, how long did this take you? Was it like a year-long process, or maybe shorter than that, longer than that?
Yeah. So usually, so for me, the like local fair, the actual fair happens in March. So essentially what you want to do is in your summer, you start brainstorming an idea. So by the time August rolls around and you start school, you kind of have at least a general idea of something that you might want to do for your project. The actual signups for the fair that I do open up in around like late September, early October, and close in around early January or late December. So between kind of September and December, that's when you actually need to start working on your project. So I would say this is kind of, yes, a year round thing, as in like the earlier you start, the better, of course. You'll have more time for idea generation, more time to actually like experiment, and then you're not going to be rushing at the end to either finish your experiment or finish your presentation and your slides and make your poster. Especially if you have like a physical component you want to demonstrate with your poster. So I would say like give yourself at least like 9 months in advance before you know your fair is going to happen, to kind of give yourself the time and the room to experiment with creating the idea, because ideas may always shift and change, and then having time to kind of put everything together.
Yeah, thank you for that advice. I think that would be really helpful for like first-time researchers. And like another question I have for your research, like you can also expand like not just like your seed detection project, but like what inspired you to get into like bioengineering and like the field of like mechanical engineering and stuff like that?
Yeah. So for me personally, if we go all the way back to 5th grade, I did a summer camp where I was first introduced to neuroscience. So that's where kind of the spark for this for STEM came from, was from that camp. And then from there in 6th grade, I watched this video, like I came upon this video on YouTube of like this prototype of a device that could go into your arteries and clean out cholesterol. And that kind of sparked my interest for kind of the biomedical aspect and the mechanical engineering aspect, and in like physical sciences in general. So 7th grade was actually the first year that I made a science project. And then I've been making one ever since then up until 11th grade. And for me, it was kind of, all my projects usually, my initial projects usually deal with something that a problem that I come across in everyday life. So for example, like my 7th grade project was, I realized when we're driving in a car, we're kind of waiting a long time at a traffic light, and it's like there's no other cars at the intersection, but our light is still red. And so we're kind of we're emitting CO2 emissions without kind of where our car isn't moving. So essentially the whole point of that project was, okay, how can I make like a smart traffic light that could optimize traffic flow so that cars spend less time waiting, so that overall CO2 emissions of waiting at a traffic light go down. So that was my first project. After that, I've done like a lot of other projects. So none of my projects are related to another. I like whatever just interests me in that moment is what I like usually do. So in 8th grade, I did like for a project on like disease detection for sepsis. 9th grade was like an intelligent slime robot. 10th grade was the seeds. And then 11th grade was kind of the working with antibiotic resistance.
Wow. One question I have is, did you do any like summer research programs that helped you?
Yeah, my first summer research program was actually the summer between 11th and 12th grade. So in terms of like actually helping me with like science projects, not really, because like most of my science projects work has been done before that, but it really did help secure kind of what is a more formal science research process, since all my other projects were done at home. So first of all, I did the program called SSP, Summer Science Program. And so SSP gave me actually like a taste of like what formal research is, because we were working in the wet lab, and it kind of gave me an opportunity to work with lots of different devices that you would use in the lab. Like you have the micropipettes. We were able to like run gel electrophoresis. Another cool thing that we did was like we sequenced DNA, and then we were able to like analyze the sequence for like mutations and stuff like that. So the summer science program, yes, I did that after I like kind of finished my last science project, but it kind of secured what I wanted to do in the future. Kind of, I really liked working in that wet lab research environment, and it kind of provided me the opportunity to like get a more hands-on like lab research experience.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And like, I know that like a lot of people are like stressed about like, oh, what should they do over the summer? But I think it's like really cool that you did a lot of like the projects at home, and like you could like create all of these ideas like just like in your house. And I think like the next question that we were wondering is like, you mentioned that you wrote like a 5-page abstract for like a research paper that you wrote. So can you describe like how that was like, and like kind of like, I know that experiences like might be a little bit different from like preparing something for a science fair. So like, how did that go for you?
Yeah, so this is like not your full-fledged like academic research paper. This is kind of, they give you, it depends on what conference again you're submitting to, but this one gave you like 5 pages to kind of give an overview of what your project is doing. So if you already have a science project, I would like greatly encourage people to submit them to conferences. You just kind of, you take your project and you kind of condense it a little bit, and then so that you just hit the most important aspects of like your research experimentation process and then the results essentially, and then you can include some figures. And conferences are slightly different from science fairs. The one that I went to, like usually at a science fair you're presenting to a judge, and the judge has like either pre-prepared questions, or is going to ask you questions along the way for them to get like a better understanding of how to compare your project to other projects in your quote unquote category. At a conference, it's much more relaxed. You just have a lot of people who work in academia who are very interested in the work that you're doing. You're just in a room. Well, I was just in a room with some other people who submitted their abstracts with their posters, and you just have individuals who are very interested in the type of work you're doing go up to you and kind of ask you to either A, give a brief overview, or they have some questions already just based off the title. It's a much more relaxed environment. You're kind of just talking to people who are just as like interested in your work as you are yourself. It is like they are like sometimes judges that you get at fairs, they have a more specific, more broad understanding of your general project. Usually people at conferences might have a more specific understanding of what you're doing depending on like what area of academia they're in. So they might be asking you a little bit more specific questions. But I think, for me, I really liked both like opportunities, both with the judges and at a conference. It just give you an opportunity to share your work.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. One question that we had was, could you like describe the impact of your research like beyond like science fairs and conferences, I guess? So like any real world applications that you were able to observe?
So unfortunately, I wasn't able to like actually implement any of my like science fair work. So a lot of my work that I do is just general prototypes of what could work, and kind of a simulation of, if this was implemented, how could that kind of affect the world? So for example, with the seeds one, if you like the simulated effect would be if a farmer checks at least 5 seeds in the bag, the chances of them like having counterfeit seeds drops from like 50% to like 5%. So that's kind of like the real world simulation. So again, I wasn't actually able to implement any of like my works. That's kind of very difficult to do, especially if you're not working kind of with a lab in conjunction. Because if you're working with a lab, they can kind of aid you with that. Working alone kind of means that when you're finished with your science project or with your research paper, that's like your final end. However, I do hope that like, once I go to university, I could meet people that could potentially help implement some of the work that I've done, specifically on my project with the antimicrobial resistance.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool how you did all of this like mainly by yourself. And I know that like a lot of like first-time researchers, they're nervous about like whether they should get a mentor or like get like a lab setting. So what is some advice that you would give to first-time researchers, and maybe like things you should look out for, or like mistakes that you made and stuff that you wish you knew before?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is like, the biggest thing of doing research at home is like, you kind of have to constrain yourself to the equipment that you have access to. That's the biggest thing. Rather than that, doing research at home doesn't have any other negatives. So if you want to do if you want to be working with bacteria, any pathogens, human subjects, that's when you start to kind of get the need a mentor, because the more kind of subjects that you're working with, the more paperwork you're going to need to get, or maybe you're going to need a lab if you're working with bacteria, and you're trying to like breed some form of like some mutant form of bacteria. But if you kind of come up with an idea that's more, I would say physical sciences is much easier to do at home. So if you're thinking of doing like an engineering project, that is much more feasible to do at home because you're not going to be working with like bacteria, for example. You're most likely be working with like physical structures. For me, my kind of loophole was, yes, I did a project on antimicrobial resistance, but all my quote unquote bacteria was just, I kind of online. So I basically just used the like DNA sequence of the bacteria. So I had like digital bacteria essentially that I was working with. So you can do something like that. I would highly encourage everyone to like try to do research at home. Again, like having a lab is like nice. and a good opportunity for you to get more like hands-on wet lab experience, but definitely not necessary for you to build a project. I know a lot of people think that, oh, if they don't have like a mentor or a lab, they like can't do research. You 100% can, as long as you have an idea and you're willing to kind of like work with it. I think like the best way to like generate ideas for me was you kind of find something you're interested in, find a current solution, think about like flaws in that current solution and how you can build off that current solution. So you don't need to have your research start from like floor zero from scratch. You can build off someone's other people's work and then add your own kind of niche aspect to that so that you can build off that.
I think we're going to transition to like broader like extracurriculars and just activities you did outside of research. So for our first question, we know that you were like really passionate about art and you had a nonprofit for art. So can you maybe explain a bit about that?
Yeah, so it was not like a actual registered nonprofit. It was kind of just a club organization that I had with my school. So what we did is, I did art all 4 years throughout high school. I really enjoy art. It kind of gives me another creative outlet in conjunction to STEM. And so I really liked working with art. And so what me and my other friends who kind of also were in the art community at school did is we paired up with, there's like a community housing organization and center near where we live. And so what we do is we kind of hosted these art workshops for the families that were being housed there at the moment. And because it's a family housing shelter, so there's a lot of children between the ages of from as low as like 4 to like 18. And so we would host these art workshops to kind of aid and give these like children an opportunity to also be creative. So we provided all the materials for them. And then we also, on top of that, did a little bit of also like creative challenges, such as like we gave them materials to build boats, and then we would put them in water and see how many pennies they could hold. So we did kind of a little bit of engineering aspect, then also just pure art aspect with like we did painting. And then additionally on top of that, what we tried to do was like each month had a theme. So like in June, like it would be like we would do projects related to Pride Month, kind of get the kids involved with that. We also did like API month, kind of African American History Month. So we had our projects kind of related to that, so they could kind of also get a more historical aspect on kind of the projects that they were doing. And we would give them like a little bit of information. We would give them coloring pages with some information on that as well, so they can get a more like interactive lesson, in addition to being able to have like a creative outlet.
Yeah, I think that's really cool how you kind of like have like this like research STEM side and also like your creative art side. So like what would you say kind of like drove you to like being interested in art? And do you think there's like any like, does it tie into your research, or is it just like something else you're passionate about?
I feel like I've always kind of had this like drive towards art. It's just that in high school I had the opportunity to take art classes that I could actually like expand on my like art abilities. So instead of just doing painting, I could do like lino cut prints and like pen and ink. In terms of its correlation to STEM, I feel like my project, like my art and my like projects for like my science fairs are kind of held separate. But I will say, like, I developed in 11th and 12th grade, or like between 10th and 12th grade, I would develop like an art portfolio. And so while I do love working with like technology and with that STEM aspect, like my art portfolio focused on like the effects of kind of the digital age on kind of the youth in the modern times, showing like that physical and emotional aspect of like the advancements of technology. So I kind of showed like, while I do have this love for technology, like my art showed, okay, there's also like some effects of this technology on us. So if that's kind of the best way I can show like the connectedness between like my STEM and art side.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Also, another thing we were curious about was fencing, and I think you and Laura actually know each other through fencing. So like, would you say fencing was a really important activity that you did in high school?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like one thing that's really hard in high school is kind of forcing yourself to do something other than study sometimes, especially when you have exam season and AP season. And I think fencing provides me that like outlet that I can go to practice, I can talk to my friends, I can like debrief with my friends and have like an opportunity to like get in some like physical exercise when like the entire day I was like either at school or like studying at home. Yeah, fencing to me is like a critical part of like I think who I am. I will be continuing fencing in college, just because I think the fencing community is like means so much to me, and like being able to like have essentially a family outside of like your family at home, and being able to like talk to them and like be with them is like really important to me.
Yeah, I think that's really sweet. And like I know that like especially from like personal experience, you have to like travel a lot for like competitions and stuff for fencing, especially like national competitions. So during those like busy times, how did you balance like fencing as well as academics?
Yeah, so that doesn't quite that does like need a little bit of juggling between like academics and fencing. The best thing I can say is like put first deadline first. When you're at a fencing competition, like whatever school deadline comes first, you try to get that deadline done. Or try to get as much work done before your fencing competition before you travel so that when you get back, you don't have as much work to do. And at one point, if you can't, like at one point you just pick one. So you either say like academics, or you can say I'm gonna do go and like 100% focus on the fencing competition. Just whatever at that time is more important to you. I know, for example, like in like first semester senior year, kind of the academics was more important to me, so I kind of laid back a little bit on the fencing. But I know in junior year I was really focused on like the fencing aspect, so I would kind of lay back a little bit more on the academic side and try to focus more on going to practice, getting my training in. You just need to find like a balance between the two. Of course you can't do everything all at once, so you will have to sacrifice one over the other, but I feel like you don't that doesn't mean you have to always sacrifice one over the other. You can find a time and place for both.
Yeah. Also, as one kind of like synthesizing everything together question, would you say like research was the most central and biggest part of your application, or would you say it was like all the combined different activities that ultimately helped you?
I think, okay, I will say, I think it probably was the combination of everything. But I will say, for example, that research did play a very important part in my, for example, personal statement. So that kind of talked about my research, but not like research specific. It talked about my love for like experimentation. So for like, I didn't fully focus all my like application aspects on my research. I think the fact that I did have a blend of both fencing and art, and on top of that research, that's what gave kind of is what represented me as a person as a whole. But I will say, like, I don't want to discount that. Yeah, research did kind of is the main, I would say, aspect of my application.
And kind of, I guess, like to wrap everything up, we were wondering, like, what are your plans for college, like this coming fall semester, and what do you hope to like do with your research in the future?
Yeah, so this upcoming fall, I'm gonna be going to MIT. I hope that my goal is actually, they have a program called Europe, which can basically give undergraduates an opportunity to do research with professors. I'm going to see if I can get like a Europe in my first semester, and first fall semester, as well as kind of if I like the lab or don't like the lab, switch to another research project in my spring semester. Like a great thing about MIT is that you can like very easily get that research experience if you want it. I'm also really excited. They also have this program where you can go to another country and teach, whether this is during the winter break period in January or during the summer, which I'm also very excited about and I really want to do. Rather than that, I'm going to keep fencing for MIT, and then I'm also probably going to either be pursuing biomedical engineering or mechanical engineering, depending on how things go. But yeah, really excited for all the cool stuff that's going to be happening there.
Yeah, thank you. I think that wraps up our episode for today. Thank you so much for coming and answering all our questions and letting us know about all your insights.
Thank you so much for
you.
having me.
Yep. Thank you. Bye.